Yo, welcome to KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station. This is Our Way on the Highway with Bristol Biggs and no Ethan Yost today. And I am alone. But not alone, because here I have Carl Goldman.
You're in good company.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm kind of nervous for this. But anyway, Carl Goldman is the co-owner of the station with his wife. He has a lot of expertise in the radio industry, if I'm not surely mistaken. So today I have a nice question for you. So what was your favorite radio show growing up?
Boy, that's a great question, a great way to start. I think the greatest radio show ever is the Jack Benny's series. Jack Benny was a comedian who did some movies that weren't quite that good, transitioned to television, but radio was where he starred, and the Jack Benny program was probably the most popular show on the radio. We're talking in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when radio was in its prime before television was around. And if you listen to any of the Jack Benny shows, you'll just hear classic theater of the mind, classic comedy, classic short. In 20 minutes, they told the story, and you really felt that you were part of Jack Benny's life. The humor was very sophisticated, and for that time, not edgy at all. It was a day where you didn't have edginess on the radio. But by far, Jack Benny is I think the genius of radio, and he made radio into. I think if there's any one person who put radio into a whole new category of entertainment, it would be Jack Benny.
Cool. So they did radio stories?
I'm sorry, say that again?
They did radio stories?
They were a comedy. It was a comedy show. It was the first of what you would consider the sitcoms of today. He was a comedian. Jack Benny started out, as did a lot of the radio comedians. They started out on they called it the Borscht Belt back then on the East Coast. They would transition to all kinds of different theater and vaudeville and do stage, and then go up to these summer places, the summer hangouts back then, and do their stand-up comedy. And that eventually evolved into what we know of as the sitcom today. So his show really was one of the early sitcoms out there.
Oh, cool. What was your favorite show or act that they had?
A specific show? Boy, it's hard. All of them were classics, and you really transitioned into his life and all the characters within his life. And I can't think of one specific one. It's just like Jack Benny is just the ultimate comedian.
Well, have you ever tried to do any kind of comedy show on?
Yes, to some degree, we've done comedy. I tried back in my early days in radio. We tried a comedy show. There was an old TV show that was very popular in the late '60s called Laugh-In, and there were some really great. National Lampoon had the National Lampoon Comedy Hour. They had a very good radio comedy show with some classic comedians in that, and so we tried to mimic those and do our own version here in Los Angeles, and called Lookout, and it was a combination of comedy, but also tying in comedy with social issues, which was one of the first ones to do anything like that. I then worked with some great comedians in radio. One of probably the most famous and the one that I think was brilliant was John Candy, who was a very famous actor, a very famous comedian. Started out with the Second City groups out of Chicago, with a whole slew of great comedians. All of them, some of them are superstars today. They all started out doing comedy acts that were improv stuff, and then evolved, and then Candy became a superstar in the movie industry. This is in the late 70s, early 80s, and through the 80s, and actually into the late 80s, with many movies, many hit movies. They're the most famous. In fact, one of the most famous movies it didn't star in, but he had a starring role in, or co-star, was Home Alone, which has since become a classic.
I've seen that.
My favorite John Candy movie, and I believe is still a classic that everyone loves, is Trains, Planes, and Automobiles with Steve Martin. If you want a little film history and you want a good time, go watch that movie. But Candy, we did a radio show, a weekly radio show with John Candy that ran for a few years. That was a satire of all the countdown shows. So back then, the countdown shows on radio were very, very popular, with Casey Kasem. Dick Clark had one. And so they would count down the hits each week. And with Candy, we created a satire of all that, where he never quite got to the songs. He never got to do what he was supposed to do on the show. And that's what made radio great, too. Radio's a theater of the mind, and great radio, I think nothing beats great radio, because you can use your imagination along with it, and there's so much you can invent through that.
Yeah, I can get... What kind of sparked your interest in radio?
I always enjoyed radio. When I was in college, my dad, my wife and I are second generation radio, and it's funny because both of our dads, who were in radio there for many years, both of them did their best to persuade us not to get into radio. And here we are today with a full career in radio. For me, I started out doing radio in college, just as a fun thing to do, and going on the air in college. And then when I came out here to grad school to Los Angeles to go to USC, the Annenberg School of Communications, my intention was to get into film. I just happened to use my connections. My dad's very, very close friend owned a radio station in Los Angeles, and my intention was just to get a job there to pay my way through grad school. And I got sucked in. I just got sucked in. Once I started, I fell in love with it. For my wife, it was a similar thing. She was going to school and then needed a summer job, and her dad got her a job at a different LA radio station as a receptionist, and she got the bug and fell in love with it. A lot of people who just step into radio for one reason or another get the bug after a while, because it's such a powerful medium and so rewarding in so many ways. Of course, today now, it's a whole different ballgame. We're sitting here with our team as we do this interview, and we're on Facebook Live. We're videotaping this for YouTube. We are streaming this on the web. I could pull it up on my phone app right now if I wanted to. Aaron, who's working the controls, is also writing content, because this will go on our website. So nowadays, KHTS has become a media brand, not just a radio station, but it's all connected and all started and is all anchored with the radio station.
I can really get kind of that bug with radio. I kind of got it with YouTube, I guess, because I enjoy listening to podcasts, which is basically exactly what we're doing here. And it's really cool how, you can just get on a place and just talk, and, people listen to that. You can make an industry out of it, and it's actually really cool, and it's really fun. So something I'd like to ask here is, so KHTS offers internships to young people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course, and that's my wife's area. We kind of divide and conquer. We take different areas of the management of the station and separate that. But we've always believed in internships, and as I said earlier, that's how I got my start, was playing with radio in college, and then actually I interned for a while, and then was lucky enough to get a job to pay my way through grad school. We believe that internships and doing hands-on is the best way, number one, for young people to get a taste and find out what they're passionate about. And then more importantly for us, it's a way for us to judge someone. So most of our staff now has flowed through the doorways of KHTS, starting out as an intern, seeing if it gives us a chance to see if they fit within our whole group here. It gives us a chance to see their skills, and also more importantly, because our internships don't just put someone in one area at the station, we really go out of our way to make sure they get a taste of everything. Even though their passion may be graphics and they're working in the graphics department, we try and expose those graphic artists to other areas as well, so they can see and understand that there's more out there, and a whole. They see that everything holistically. They see the whole instead of just getting into a narrow area. And then through that, they can discover if graphics is really their passion and if it's a good fit. And then that leads hopefully to a job here, or if not a job here, certainly with the experience of what they've learned here, it's a great roadway to a job elsewhere. So I highly encourage internships. We do internships all year long, and with a lot of schools, we do it tied in for credit. So it's a great way to get credit while doing an internship.
Cool. I was actually talking about internships with Sarah Brown, who was my ride on the way over here about internships. And when I was on my way here, I was talking about 2 internships that I would like to go to, which was welding and music, which I think we were talking about before
Right.
the radio show started. But kind of making me interested in interning here. So you might see me next year, because I do have to have an internship.
There
for
we go.
12th
Well, your
grade.
first step would be to make an appointment with my wife, Jerry,
All right.
and take it from there.
All right. Cool.
And that, we're talking about internships. I think one of the things, and Aaron's smiling because he started as an intern, and also Andrew, who came in here to set up the Facebook, who's now heads up our entire web department. Andrew started as an intern as well, and Kyle Jellings, who's our station manager, started as an intern. But what I was going to say is, radio, most people think of radio as just the person behind the microphone, what you're doing right now, and radio is so much more than that. And today, radio is so much more than that, because there's no radio station in the country that doesn't have other media attached to it now. We're fully a media outlet. So in our case, we have a complete news department here. So news is an entire area. Within the news, it's not just doing broadcast news, but we've got video news, we've got audio news, we've got printed news. We have our daily email newsletter that goes out each day. That we have, of course, the news that's being pushed out on social media. So there's all different platforms to tie in with now that never existed when we first purchased this radio station in 1990. We just had one funnel, as we call it, and now we have many multiple funnels that push things out and connect ourselves with the public out here. Our focus are the 300,000 residents in Santa Clarita, and to us, it doesn't matter whether we connect with them through an email at the end of the day, or through hearing this broadcast right now, or watching it later on YouTube or Facebook. It doesn't matter, as long as we make the connection with them, and they then become connected to us.
So you probably already said this. But I kind of already asked, like, what kind of sparked your interest. But how did you start?
Yeah, that's a good question, and everyone starts a different way. And we talked about internships. Right now, that's probably the most powerful and easiest path to take going into broadcast or any of the other components we talked about with broadcast. I started out, and back then, there was, as I said, only one funnel. All there was the radio signal and the radio dial going there. The internet didn't exist. And so I started out getting a taste of radio in college. Then also, while I was in college, I did a internship for a month at a New York radio station as part of my studies. And then, as I said, I came out here and just got a job. Back then, there was a job. The job was the lowest level job, entry-level job at the radio station that I managed to get through the connections through my dad in LA in order to just pay my way through grad school. And I was the gopher. I was running around. I was doing a lot of things that don't even exist in radio anymore because of the technology. So back then, this is now 1974, way, way, way long before you were born. Back then, the only way to get a commercial that was produced, and they came back then on old reel-to-reel tapes, we would have to go pick up the commercial from the ad agency or from the client. Occasionally, some commercials we produced at the radio station ourselves, but the majority of commercials we had to get from the ad agency. And back then, the only way to get it from an ad agency was to physically go to the ad agency and get it. So my job, a good half of the day, was traveling around town and stopping by each ad agency to pick up commercials or pick up copy. Even the copy which was read live, you couldn't get copy for that day without physically driving and picking it up or messengering someone over to get it. There were no fax machines back then. I know you're glazed there to believe what was life like. Yeah, there was no fax machines, no cell phones, none of that existed. So half of my day was that. Back then, without computers, scheduling the commercials took 3 different people full time to manually schedule all the commercials. Today, you have some stations and teams where, we've got a group of stations in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and the Antelope Valley, and I believe there's about 24 stations, and they have 3 people doing the logs, the billing, the trafficking for all 24 stations all in one day. That would have been, in the old days, that would have taken about 80, 90 people to do that. And now 3 people are doing it because it's all computerized. So to answer your question, I guess is for me, I stepped in doing a lot of different things that don't even exist anymore. And then I happen to be, as I grew and got better at it, there was an opening for an on-air position doing interviews, and I was at the right place at the right time with the skills already, and more importantly, the comfort level. They had the trust in me that I fit in already. So they didn't have to do an outside hire. They can simply move me into the slot. So, and that's half the battle, is being at the right place at the right time with the right skills and the right combination of ingredients that will fit with whatever employer you intend to get connected with.
I don't know if you can see it on my face, but I'm absolutely baffled by the amount of work that you had to do without computers, like actually going somewhere to grab a commercial and come back and...
Yeah, that would actually be an interesting show and probably a whole interesting book, is to go back, to just take a snapshot of 1974 for any career or literally any industry, and do a quick snapshot of what it was like in 1974 versus what you're doing today and what we're doing today. Multitasking didn't exist back then.
Yeah. In music, I actually did a little music history in it, and it had to do with the making of the music and the mixing of it. And basically, they took these tapes. I'm pretty sure you can advocate for this, or you can correct me on some of it, because I'm probably not entirely accurate. But they would take the tapes and literally cut it, with scissors.
Yeah, you want to see the calluses on this finger? That's from splicing tapes and commercials at a radio station. That's how we did it the old days. Now I could sit with a blacksmith at the Smithsonian and show how to do it. Yeah, we used to cut tapes and edit. Everything had to be edited that way, and it was a total skill that's now useless at this point, other than, of course, on the digital side, I still have the ear for the stuff, and you learn that, but the physical part of it is now totally gone. And it wasn't until a long time after that multi-tracking started coming in, and then sliding over to the digital arena. But yes, you're absolutely right. And before you had tapes, everything was put on on an old disc. That's how old radio shows go back to Jack Benny. The early Jack Benny radio shows were recorded on a record, on a disc, because
wow.
the tapes didn't even exist back then. We're going back to the 1930s. So there's been a complete evolution. There's a historical story I tell with the technology that to me in our business is the most profound, and that is in 3 different presidential terms in a row. 1916, you had Woodrow Wilson, who was our president, for his inauguration at the Capitol. The only way to hear him was through a megaphone. So only 100 or so people who were around him got to hear his inaugural speech. The next president, so just fast forward 4 years to the next president, who was Harding. Harding was able to do it with a PA system. So at that point, they put a PA system all through the Capitol, and as you know, all the way down to the Washington Monument. And so now you had thousands of people who could hear him. 4 years later, just one more president, who happened to be Coolidge. Radio had come in, and Coolidge was his inauguration was, I believe, the first network radio broadcast ever in the history of the country. And his went out to, I'm saying like 14, 15, 16 different stations, different cities. And so now you had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people tuning into his inauguration. So just in those 3 little switches, we went through a profound switch that right now, as we talk about speeding through the technology, and you know, my phone, which is 2 years old now, is also ready for the Smithsonian, but that had to have more profound changes. I wasn't alive during that time, but if you think about what that meant to our country and what that technology did to change all of our habits and to change our culture, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, definitely. It's insane. So we're going to have to wrap it up here. This has been Bristol Biggs and Carl Goldman, owner of KHTS, co-owner of KHTS, and this has been Our Way on the Highway. Have a wonderful day.